Welcome to episode 104 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm going to talk about situations in which an experienced teacher is suddenly deemed ineffective, and we'll talk about how to adapt or exit gracefully. Visit truthforteachers.com to get a printable PDF version of the transcript for this episode, or to share your thoughts in the comments. So I want to talk this week about the emails that I get on an almost daily basis from veteran teachers who are completely overwhelmed at how the job that they signed up for 20, 30, even 40 years ago is nothing like the job that they're required to do today. These are teachers who entered the field because they love kids and they love teaching. They've done what they believed was an outstanding job for a decade or more before suddenly finding the criteria for competency shifting and the bar raising and a whole host of new skill sets needed, from teaching with technology to dealing with students whose brains have been rewired by constant media stimulation. After years of successfully teaching kids to read and write and add and subtract, these teachers are suddenly being told they're ineffective. And because this is their life's work, that proclamation hits them like a slap in the face. It affects them to the core of their being. I want to amplify the voices of teachers who are experiencing this right now and let you all know you are not alone and you're not the only one facing this. And hopefully together today we can talk about what can be done. My hope is that this is an episode that will be useful to you even if you're not facing this situation yourself, because every teacher works with at least one colleague who's in a similar place. You might be listening to this and actually feeling frustrated with these teachers, believing that they're not pulling their weight and they're not changing with the times. So I hope this episode will do something to strengthen the relationships between you and your colleagues as well. And if you're a newer teacher and still feeling sort of baffled at what's being expected of you and how the standards for your effectiveness are being raised and you're feeling like you can't keep up, well, these tips will apply to you too. So I want to start by reading you an email that I got recently so you understand the types of things that are happening right now. This is what this woman said in her message to me. She said, "My 35-year teaching career seems to be coming to an end. I've always been a learner and I'm into everything. I have a master's in brain-based learning. I am reading and ESOL certified, endorsed, and I'm national board certified. None of that seems to be valued these days. These last few years have included many awful changes in curriculum with loads of micromanagement to make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do and when we're supposed to be doing it. With the rigid curriculum, it's hard to build meaningful bonds with students. I've been having serious health problems recently, which has made it even harder for me to focus and be energetic for the kids. So here I am, unable to do all the cool things with my students that make me me, and the things that I haven't done yet but I want to. My passive aggressiveness has kicked in, and I just backed away from everything with big disinterest, making myself look ineffective and uncaring. I feel like a failure. A failure after 35 years of blood, sweat, and tears. I think I'm going to have to retire, but I'll miss being a teacher, or at least the old style of what teaching used to be about." If you are that teacher, if you're someone who changed children's lives year after year and are suddenly finding this career to be unrecognizable to what you thought you were signing up to do, I want you to know the following things. First off, burnout and cynicism are a natural result of repeated disappointment and perceived failure. Let me say that again. Burnout and cynicism are a natural result of repeated disappointment and perceived failure. Being told that you're ineffective and feeling like you can't possibly be successful at a job can trigger the kind of passive aggressiveness and lack of effort that this teacher described. But a cynical teacher is not a teacher who doesn't care, which is clear from the rest of her email, right? She's a teacher who cares a lot, but has been repeatedly disappointed. She's done what she feels is her absolute best and been told that it's not good enough over and over and over again. Shutting down is just what happens sometimes in those situations with teachers, just like it happens with kids. If a student does his or her best to follow the rules or do the homework or whatever it is that's being required, and feels like every time it just results in having the bar raised higher and higher, the student often gives up. That doesn't mean the child doesn't want to learn or doesn't care about being successful, even though it could appear like that on a surface level. Underneath, most kids, like most teachers, want to succeed. They're simply discouraged from putting forth what feels like a Herculean effort to them and having it be received by others as not good enough. These are not unusual situations. There are tens of thousands of teachers who would once have been considered good or effective and are now being told that they are not. So please don't feel like you're the only one struggling with this and not understanding what happened to the job that you initially were doing all those years ago. Expectations for teachers have definitely climbed dramatically in recent years. And I would argue that every teacher is struggling to keep up with the new expectations. In fact, I'd argue that students are also struggling to keep up. Look at what we expect of our kids now compared to what we were asking them to do 20 years ago in school. Look even just at 5-year-olds, right? If a child enters kindergarten not already knowing colors, shapes, letters, how to write your name, plus a whole host of self-regulation and emotional and interpersonal skills, if you don't have all of that before you even step foot in the school building, you're behind before the first day of school even begins. We are expecting more of kids and we're expecting more of teachers. This is a fact. You're not imagining things and you're not going crazy. And feeling like your job requirements have changed to the point where they're almost unrecognizable, well, that would be confusing and disheartening for just about anyone. Change that we don't initiate ourselves is often scary and very difficult. It's normal to feel bewildered by what's going on, especially if you don't have a strong personal learning network that's talking about these changes and sharing strategies for how to adjust. Sometimes it's helpful just to hear someone else say, "I get it. This is difficult work. You're not alone." So if no one else has told you that yet, you're hearing it from me here today. The whole world is changing quickly. And really, just about everyone is struggling to figure out the new rules and adapt in many different areas of life. So this is a phenomenon that's not specific to schools. Almost everyone's career is changing due to technology and the global economy and a whole host of other factors. Look at doctors, for example, and the amount of paperwork that they now have to do, and the amount of liability insurance they need. That's all increased exponentially for them. They often spend more time documenting the care that they give and trying to avoid lawsuits than actually giving care. Sounds familiar, right? But doctors have to keep changing with the times too. They can't just keep trying to make house calls and give people opioids like they did in the 1800s. Imagine if a doctor said, "I'm just going to close my door and practice medicine however I think is best." They can't do that. And neither can we as teachers. We cannot just close our doors and teach the way that we've always taught. The world is changing. Our professions are changing, and we have to keep growing and adapting. None of us are feeling like we have everything mastered that we need to, or like we have any idea what things will be like for us a few years from now. The world as a whole feels like a less stable and less predictable place in many ways. And I say that not to be a messenger of gloom and doom, but to reassure you that what you're experiencing is just a small piece of much larger shifts in our society. Knowing that can make it easier to understand what's happening and why. Now, here's the other thing that I really want you to keep in mind. Just because you can't do all the things well doesn't mean that you're a failure, because no teacher is able to keep up with everything. We're all struggling to manage the amount of information we now have and get everything done that's necessary. I assure you that the young, idealistic teachers who are praised by your administrators are also struggling in their own way. I don't know any teacher who feels like, "Yep, I've got this whole teaching thing on lock. I know all the latest tech tools. I've integrated them seamlessly into my instruction. I have empowered kids to fully take ownership of their learning to the point where they are all on task and engaged in their work 100% of the time. And now I'm ready to see if Michelle Pfeiffer is available to play my role in Dangerous Minds 2. No one is at that spot, right? And by the way, if we never have another teacher savior movie like that again, it would do us all some good. Teaching is a difficult and demanding job for everyone. Younger or newer teachers that you see might be able to do some things well that you struggle with, but there's still areas where you shine. For example, you might be exceptionally talented at explaining difficult concepts to kids, or have a huge bank of experiences to draw from when deciding what's going to reach a child in a difficult situation. I know it took me about 6 years of teaching third grade before I felt like I really had a solid method of getting my class to understand how to estimate and round numbers. It took years of trial and error just on this one skill out of hundreds that I had to teach kids. Years of experimentation and observing kids and probing their thinking for me to finally find the magic formula that worked for my teaching style. That special way to explain and have kids practice that would make the light bulb come on for about 90% of the class. That sort of skill may not be specifically addressed on a teacher evaluation form, and it's extremely hard to evaluate, especially when it's based on just an hour or so spent by an observer in the teacher's classroom. But that's just one example of an area where veteran teachers may outshine their newer counterparts without anyone realizing it, maybe not even the veteran teacher him or herself. So pay attention to your special strengths and skills. Pay attention to the things that you bring to the table and don't overlook them, even if you feel like others are. You cannot allow anyone else's opinion or standards to determine your self-worth. Your self-worth and value as a human being and value as an educator is not determined by the scores on a test that you didn't even take yourself. Your true value can never be determined by a checklist or a form. The district or state measurement of what constitutes effectiveness is simply one set of standards. It's one very limited measure of success. Now, I realize that it's an important measure. Your livelihood depends on it, but you can't let it impact how you feel about yourself as a person. You are more than a test score. You are more than a teacher evaluation score. You have value simply because you are alive on this planet. If no one else is telling you that, you need to seek those teachings out on a regular basis so that you can reframe your thinking and redefine your self-worth. As Eleanor Roosevelt said, no one can make you feel inferior without your consent. And similarly, you cannot allow anyone else's opinion or standards to determine whether you retire or stay in the classroom. You need to make your own decision about whether this career is working for you or if it's time to exit the classroom. Do not wait until someone forces you out. Take charge of your own professional development. Take charge of your own life. Make the decision based on what is best for you and your students. Do the hard work of honest self-reflection here and ask yourself, is this how I want to spend the next few years of my life? Am I willing to rise to the challenge of adapting, or is my heart simply not in this anymore? Am I doing my students a disservice by staying around? Am I truly able to teach them the way that they need to be taught in this new era? Is the level of education kids are getting in my class comparable to what they get if they were assigned to a colleague? Would I want my own child to be in my class? Am I willing and capable of meeting the current expectations of the job? So ask yourself these questions and be honest. Check to see if there's a place deep down in your soul that says, I don't know. I don't really think so. I think this job is taking a tremendous toll on my physical and mental health, and I'm really not sure if it's fair to my students. I need to take care of myself and give the kids an opportunity to learn from someone who's going to teach them the way they deserve to be taught. If that's the case, I encourage you to trust your gut instincts here. Come to terms with them. And once you've had a chance to work out a plan, take action on them. Do not be the teacher that everyone knows should have retired a decade ago. Take charge of your life. This may not have been what you envisioned for yourself. It may not have been the original plan, but you can make a new plan starting now. Now, if you feel like you can rise to the challenge, if you still have a little bit more left in you to give, if you feel like you can do right by your students, then remember, effective teaching is a continuum. It's a continuum on which every teacher is slowly moving forward. If you choose to demonstrate a willingness to learn and grow, things can improve for you immediately. I feel like growth mindset is a bit of an overused term at this point, so I sort of hesitate to say it here, but that is basically the heart of it. Choose to believe that you are capable of improvement. You are able to learn to do better. You can push through challenges and succeed. If you're going to stick around, you must be willing to move forward and adapt, even if it's through slow baby steps. Your administration is not expecting perfection. In general, a principal simply wants to see growth. She or he wants to see that you are not openly resistant to any new changes that come down the pike, and that you are willing to have a good attitude and make an effort. Displaying a true openness to learn new things, not just saying it or not just doing it one time with a sour look on your face, but a true change at the heart level can completely transform your experience as a teacher. Displaying a true openness to learning new things can get colleagues who previously gave up on helping you to decide they're willing to show you once more how they do a new requirement. That kind of attitude can get a principal who seemed to criticize your every move to ease up a bit and recognize growth. That attitude can get students who fought you on every instruction you gave to feel on some level, wait a second, something is different about my teacher now. The hardness and rigidity is gone. She's a little more patient. She's a little more willing to go with the flow and experiment and take risks. Don't look at effective teaching as some impossible end goal that you will never reach. Instead, focus on taking the first step forward on the continuum. After that, take the next step. One step at a time. The whole staircase doesn't have to be illuminated here. You don't have to see the entire path ahead of you. All you need to see is the next right step. One right choice right now. And then in the next moment, another right choice. Remember why you entered this profession to begin with. Those motivators are still there, even if it's harder to connect with the kids now, or harder to be creative, or harder to be free to find teachable moments. You're not choosing to learn and adapt and grow for the sake of your principal, or your district, or an evaluation, or job security. You're doing it because it's your choice. You love the core of this job. You love the kids. You love the subject matter, and you want to do right by the kids. You refuse to live another day miserable and overwhelmed and feeling like you're not good enough. Today is the day you take that first step forward. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be worth it. If you want a PDF download of this episode that you can print or share, go to truthforteachers.com and click on episode 104. Truth for Teachers is a proud member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. For more great podcast recommendations, go to edupodcastnetwork.com. That's edupodcastnetwork.com.